Whosoever committeth sin is the servant of sin, and the servant abideth not in the house forever, but the Son abideth forever. If the Son therefore shall make you free, ye shall be free indeed. I know that ye are Abraham's seed, but ye seek to kill me, because my word hath no place in you.
Good morning, welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. My name is Paul Strangini. A little under the weather over the weekend. So we left off, Jesus is about to be betrayed. Let's pick it up with verse 46. This is really as loud as it goes. Huh. Alright. Rise, let us be going. Behold, he is at hand that doth betray me. And while he yet spake, lo, Judas, one of the 12, came, and with him a great multitude with swords and staves, from the chief priests and the elders of the people. How about I go into sneezing fits? Very deep itch. Alright. So along comes Judas with his new friends. The multitude from the chief priests, they whipped up a mob. They got a few swords and some sticks. You know. Okay, so now he that betrayeth him gave them a sign, saying, Whomsoever I shall kiss, the same is he, hold him fast. Not so, you know, in a situation like that, it may not be obvious immediately, I guess, who you're supposed to grab. They knew of him, but you know, you think about it. Back at that time, people, you know, they didn't get that close to Jesus. There was the 12. He had another 70 disciples. They were all in close proximity to him, and so when he would do things publicly, it wasn't on TV. You know, everyone didn't get to see his face. They heard of him doing stuff secondhand and stuff, and maybe they'd even been present. But getting really close to him would not be easily done, and so, especially people who were gonna, you know, if you're gonna enlist a bunch of people to grab him for the purpose of putting him to death, you're going to prefer people who have not been close to this guy, obviously. Maybe they don't know much about him, and they just trust the chief priests, you know. So they would need to know who he was, and a description might serve, but not necessarily. So he said, look, I'll lay a kiss on him. That's him. Grab him. And so, oh well, let's just read on. And forthwith he came to Jesus and said, Hail, Master, and kissed him. And Jesus said unto him, Friend, wherefore art thou come? You may know, I remember I learned in high school that wherefore means why. For what purpose? I remember, you know, everyone when they're a little kid, you probably heard the line, Wherefore art thou, Romeo? And then the joke, the punchline is, I'm over here. Because it seems like that she's looking, where are you? But it means more like what for than wherefore. Then came they and laid hands on him and took him. In another gospel, I forget which, he says, Betrayest thou the Son of Man with a kiss? it is a highly ironic thing to betray someone with a kiss. Because a kiss is something you give to your closest, most intimate friends or family. And, in our culture, we generally go with a handshake or something, or close friends, maybe a hug. But, in many cultures, it's quite normal to give each other a kiss, on the cheek, not a passionate lip kiss, right? But it could be a kiss on the lips, too. It's not like... It's just the way people greet each other, according to that culture. A lot of times we read things into things, beyond, because based on our own perverse society and the way we view things, on the twist on them. And behold, one of them that were with Jesus stretched out his hand and drew his sword, and struck a servant of the high priest, and smote off his ear. Such an awesome turn of phrase. He smote his ear off. Then said Jesus unto him, Put up again thy sword into his place, for all they that take the sword shall perish with the sword. Thinkest thou that I cannot now pray to my Father, and he shall presently give me more than 12 legions of angels? And he's speaking, of course, hypothetically. If he had power. But it was not the Father's will. It's an interesting thing that he would say that after praying in the garden. He wanted it to pass, as far as the Spirit was willing, because he was willing to do it, but obviously because he did it, and it had to be willingly, meaning voluntarily. You could look at it and say, well, he didn't want to because he said, let this cup pass from me. The way it was portrayed is that the Spirit was willing, but the flesh is weak, meaning he looked at his disciples and their disposition towards the whole situation. They were willing to be his disciples, willing to lay down their lives for him. He knew that, and eventually many of them would. And Peter specifically was martyred, And so, in many, I had a book once, and I think I still have it somewhere, that delineates like the martyrdoms of people, but a lot of that's based on legend, and it doesn't really matter how they died, but it is believed that most of the disciples did end up being killed for the faith. And it is important that, in spite of the fact of I think of when I was young, I remember going up onto the high dive. I don't mean the one that's just 3 meters high, the one that you climb up about 12 steps to the top and it's up there. I mean the one that's like the platforms that go up, 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 up till you're 10 meters off the ground. And I remember, not really wanting to jump when I got up there, like having this feeling of like, I should not do that. Your body is rebelling. It knows you want to jump. It knows you intend to jump. And it says, don't jump. Don't jump. Don't throw me off of there. It's a safety mechanism. It's like when you see something hot or sparking, there's a certain amount of intelligence we have where when we learn to recognize danger, we have sort of an autonomic system. Autonomic means it's like breathing. Breathing is an autonomic, which comes from Greek actually, because nomos in Greek means the law. It means self-governed, self-lawed, self-ruling system in the body that causes you to breathe. You don't have to think about it. I mean, you can certainly breathe voluntarily, but you don't have to consciously think about breathing to breathe. You will do it. Now I'm very conscious of it, but the whole time, like I got up this morning, I didn't think once. I didn't think once about breathing. Not once until that moment. It's not like using your fingers to do some dexterous task where you have to really think about it. But even that, like, I can play my guitar without my left hand ever thinking about what it's doing. Except that I tell it to change. I just think A and it forms the shape of an A, or C, it forms the shape of a C. I don't have to actually tell my fingers, okay, first string, third string, and all that. So also you have a fear response. When you know that something's dangerous and you tell your body to do it, your body says, no, you shouldn't. And that's built in. Jesus had that too. His body said, no, don't. And it would be a very traumatic feeling. To know, like, specifically, you know what I mean? To, like, head into that knowingly. I already talked about this. Well, the reason I'm saying is because, you know, Peter cuts off the high priest, or the servant of the high priest. Yeah, a servant of the high priest. He cuts off his ear. Sharp knife, huh? And they weren't unarmed. You know, why would he be carrying that? Could be for all kinds of purposes. I mean, you think about it. They lived in the Romans' times, right? And he could carry like a weapon of some sort around, and he wasn't being frisked and thrown into jail. I don't know that there was a war sword. You know, having a nice large knife. You know, I mean, you have a knife like this long, with a nice 12-inch blade. Considering he was a fisherman, it was always need to cut things up. Small blades like that can still do quite a bit of work. And so probably something like that along those lines. I wouldn't imagine him having like a big long sword. And Jesus says something that is repeated in Revelation. My nose really wants to sneeze. Chapter 13 of Revelation says, if any man have an ear, let him hear. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. They that kill with the sword shall be. He that killeth with the sword shall be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and faith of the saints. You know, throughout history, there's a lot of, you know, warfare. And when Christians engage in it, they die like anyone else. You know, if you pick up the sword, you will be killed with a sword. Or you're just as likely as anyone else, that's for sure. But once you start using it, once you start resorting to violence, don't be deceived. That is never a one-way street. I'm sometimes very fascinated with the prospects of war again on the North American continent. Another civil war people talk about. And I don't know how possible that really is. Well, it's always possible, you know. People who think otherwise are fools. You know, all you have to do is create the right circumstances and you will have war. People think they can just keep doing things. You know, like you have a highly polarized society where a lot of people are in disagreement with each other. And one side keeps doing things against the other's will. It's like when in the first Civil War. I don't know what I'm going to talk about a little bit. I want to. In the first, and I'm a student of history. In the first Civil War, what sparked it is like they kept adding more non-slave states, and that the South started seeing the writing on the wall and thinking they're going to outlaw slavery. Then Lincoln got elected, and they said, "Oh, we're going our own way, separation." And the rest of the nation said no, and so they fought the most bloody war in American history. And they all thought it'll be over in a weekend. But it dragged out 5 years. Yeah. Essentially, I think it was a little over that. Anyways, people, they think we'll pick up the sword, we'll win. You don't think what it means for you, and your family necessarily. This is what it means. It means the death of your sons, the death of your fathers, and quite possibly the rape and murder of your daughters, and all kinds of horrors. You start whipping out the sword, you bring out the weapons, you start fighting with violence. The violence is going to return to you. I mean, we've had a lot, and here's, one of the things that we've had a lot of relatively lopsided wars. And we think, where we, but these things can be dragged out. And it's not clear to me that any war fought on this continent would be lopsided. But we should not lightly take up the sword, because it's just as likely to kill you as it is to kill anyone else. And so Jesus says, put it away. Don't you know, I can go to my Father and I can have 12 legions of angels. That takes a lot of faith. That's a tough one, because like I said, it's like I am a take up the sword kind of person. Like I think in those directions. Like I want to take the sword. I want the sword. I want to see the world bent according to the will of God, at least as far as I see it. That's what people have done, And it never turns out well when people have done that. But you gotta understand the instinct. I mean, you should at least know that, that you are Peter as much as any, that's the thing, is like, when you read the Gospels and you imagine yourself walking with the Lord, you can pretty much count that the person who's supposed to, if there's a character in there you're supposed to identify with, I hope it's Peter. I try to think of myself in those terms of messing up, but having good intentions. I don't want to be Judas. I mean, gosh, betray the Lord for money. But certainly there are characters. But if you're conscientiously following the Lord, if you are a faithful follower of His, you're probably prone to most of Peter's mistakes, if not all of them. The resort to violence, to pave the way for the righteous kingdom of God. And it seems like, well, what are we going to do? Let them walk all over us. And well, the problem is, it's like a lot of things. It's like divorce. It's gonna, if your spouse wants the divorce and you're a believer, it says you can let them go, right? But it's also clear you're not supposed to try to provoke them or try to make that happen somehow. So don't take a Pharisee approach to that. Like, well, I have to. If they want to go, well, maybe I can arrange that. That's not righteous. You're supposed to be conscientiously and honestly trying to make things work. Same thing with war. Wars come. It's bad enough that war and conflict comes, right? It's going to happen. There are wars. Don't be the one causing the war. Don't be the first to take up the sword. And then you think, well, strike first. Does the first strike always lead to victory? Ask Germany in World War I and World War II. They thought, I have to strike first or I won't be able to win. They struck first, they didn't win in either case. So much for that, you know. The first strike does not always win. And in fact, you know, the kind of underhandedness that you expose in the way you go to war can cause your enemies to multiply and their rage also to be fomented against you, and they will fight even harder. Whereas maybe they might seek peace first. You know, if you seek peaceable means to resolve your conflicts, you're much more likely to have a good outcome. If everyone seeks peace, it's much better than everyone grabbing their swords. That should be obvious. But I hear talk, people think like, oh, we have to have a war. We have to have a war to fix everything. Not a lot of talk, but I saw a poll that thinks 1/3 of the American people think another civil war is inevitable. That's not good. To have the faith to know that God has your back. You know, I try to tell myself that in the worst extremes. You know, Jesus says he would give me 12 legions of angels. But what he's going to rely on instead is that through faith, he should rise from the dead. Now that's like tough, saying like, okay, I'll die and just trust you'll bring me back, God. That is the faith. Unless my window isn't sized properly. And what he says next, but how then shall the scriptures be fulfilled? That thus it must be. And we talked about some of the scriptures in the Psalms and stuff where it says, you know, well, like Isaiah 53, he was taken from justice. You know, he was sort of denied justice, is the implication. He made his grave with the wicked. You know, there's all these things that say, you know, how about they pierced my hands and my feet, Psalm 22. On my other YouTube channel, I have that. That's a good song to listen to. In fact, let's just do that now. Subscribe to Line by Line Bible Studies and click on the like button. So I haven't been feeling well over the weekend, so sorry if this is a slow day. You can visit oraclesofgod.org, linked in the description below, and then there's my other YouTube page, also linked, and on there you will find among my songs, Psalm 22, I did a video for it, that shows the scriptures with the words, and some images, and that's a real good one. They pierced my hands and my feet. It was written certainly long before Jesus walked the earth, but most probably 1,000 years. Jesus' first priority is to fulfill the scriptures. That should be our priority. You know, we should follow after his example. Fulfill the scriptures. You know, the grace of God hath appeared to all men, teaching us that denying ungodliness and worldly lust, we should live righteously, soberly, and godly in this present world. Well, let's fulfill that. Add your faith, virtue to virtue, knowledge to knowledge, temperance to temperance, godliness to godliness, brotherly kindness, love. Let us so do. If there are any scriptures you read and you think you can fulfill them, make that a priority. Fulfill it. I mean, if it's something you should fulfill. Not everything is for you, just because it's in the book. Verse 55. In that same hour, said Jesus to the multitudes, are ye come out as against a thief with swords and staves for to take me? I sat daily with you teaching in the temple, and ye laid no hold on me. But all this was done that the scriptures of the prophets might be fulfilled. Then all the disciples forsook him and fled. They saw he was surrendering himself and just merely flinging words at them. You come out against a thief? I was in your temple daily. Why didn't you grab me? Taunts them, essentially. Why didn't you grab me while I was in the temple all the time? He knows why they're there. They know why they're there. They know why he's asking. Why didn't you fellows grab me when I was right there in your lap? Are you afraid or something? Why now? Why did you come out in the middle of the night with swords and staves? Are you afraid of something? But all this was done that the scriptures of the prophets might be fulfilled. Then all the disciples forsook him and fled. And they that laid hold on Jesus led him away to Caiaphas the high priest, where the scribes and the elders were assembled. In the middle of the night, having an assembly. But Peter followed him afar off to the high priest's palace, and went in, and sat with the servants to see the end. Now the chief priests and the elders, and all the councils sought false witness against Jesus to put him to death, but found none. Yea, though many false witnesses came, yet found they none. And at last came 2 false witnesses. What it means is they didn't find any credible false witnesses. You got to have at least... You can't just have the town drunk come over. I saw him, he blah, blah, blah. They found all kinds of witnesses. But the people who are willing to bear false witness, what kind of people are they going to be? You know, they're not going to be very credible people, obviously. And not only that, they may not even know the sort of thing without being coached, like to say, you know, I saw him, whatever. You know, I'm not going to make up what their false witness could have been. They couldn't find any 2 that agreed on what it was that Jesus had done that was worthy of death. And then finally, they got a hold of 2. Now, it's doubtful they said, we're seeking false witnesses. They're just looking for... If you're looking to put someone to death and they've done nothing worthy of death, what you need is a false witness. And said, this fellow said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and to build it in 3 days. Now that's a good false witness. Because it's kind of close to something he said. This is the kind of thing that we have all the time today. This is what our news media does. Quite frankly, I can't help but mention it. I mean, it's just, I look at it and it's like, oh, he said this, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, wait, that's not what he said. That's not what that person said. Oh, that's what you think he meant. You don't say that. It's like, well, it's obvious it was a dog whistle, or it's obvious it was talking. You know, it was coded language. What we heard. Yes, those were not his literal words, but we heard what we heard. And we could hear a guy bragging about being able to destroy the temple and build it again in 3 days. And, you know what he really said, of course. He said, destroy this temple and I will build it again in 3 days. And so they attribute the destruction to him, basically, and then they come up with something different. He said he would destroy the temple and build it again in 3 days. The funny thing is, it's a fascinating false witness because it's like, well, he could have destroyed the temple and built it in 3 days. I mean, if he could call down 12 legions of angels, it's certainly a possibility. You're not even allowed to talk about hypotheticals, apparently. You know what I mean? Like, to say, I am able to destroy this temple and build it in 3 days. I'm able to do that. You know, to them, that's sort of blasphemy. Blasphemy of the temple. But I hope you, when you watch the news or anything, if you watch that at all, I hope you keep your eyes open. Very often, if you do serious checking, they falsely report what people say. If they are considered enemies. When it comes to their enemies, the news media, which is not a neutral player at all anymore, on both, whatever side of the political spectrum you fall, you know, there's a sort of news outlets which are catering to that point of view, and this is how it has ever been. It just, in the old days, it used to be more subtle. They would not be so overt, like after what happened in our country, actually prior to World War II, there was a lot of biased media. It was normal. World War II caused the country to really come together, and the news media kind of turned into a propaganda arm for establishment politics. But they always leaned left a bit, especially, you know, just back when it was just a few outlets. Now those outlets, the same outlets that are still existing, even as there's new media coming to life, are leaning harder and harder left. And they become extremely dishonest, which I found shocking. Because I don't say that lightly, like it. Sometimes you don't like the way. I remember when I was growing up, I didn't like my dad would get upset about the way they would report things. And it was very subtle, the bias. It was subtle in the way they would talk about people who they differ with politically. You know, they talk about the president at that time when I was growing up, which was Reagan, and the way they talk about him was subtly negative. You know, it's like, people are wondering if this is such a good idea. I mean, they don't say it like that, but like, many experts are questioning the decision to da-da-da. And that's all right. That's kind of news reporting. Reporting people's questions, though, is not exactly, you know, like, well, many people disagree. Well, you could, you know, say that about any political question. It's like, they've, you know, they passed a new law, blah, 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 but quite a few people don't agree with this, and they're questioning whether this is a wise move. You know, it's like, but there's a certain, when it's their side of the political spectrum, there's a certain sort of triumphalism. And when it's the other side, there's a certain amount of skepticism. They're skeptical against their enemies or against things they think they're in favor of, and then when it's things they're opposed to, things they're in favor of, they're cheerleaders. Things they're skeptical of, they're skeptical. If they're against, they're skeptical. God, Paul. Well, you know, when you are going about studying your Bible or trying to, you know, because witnessing, bearing witness, in Christianity we have something called witnessing. You know, they say, you know, it means to go and tell people what Jesus has done for you, something like that. To share the gospel with people. Something people always think, well, there's something I ought to do. I ought to share my faith with people. People will tell me, Paul, I wish I could talk like you. You know, today not talking so well. But I want to be able to communicate my faith in a way that is compelling to people and it helps people, gives them a reason to believe, or at least so that it's accurate. So if they reject me, they're rejecting the gospel and not they're just rejecting me being a bad messenger. Well, I think before you worry about that, we want to be true witnesses. And so that's part of, part of becoming a true witness is learning. You've got to learn. And as if you're not able to communicate it, you should keep learning until you can. If you allow yourself to be, I usually use the word marinated, if you allow yourself to be marinated in the Word and make it more and more part of your life, it is only inevitable that you'll have some ability to talk about it. I remember at times my wife, after years of studying, she doesn't always practice it, as far as like get opportunities to talk to people, and she'll hate that I'm even talking about her, but oh well. But she, then something will come up, and she says she is surprised at all the things that come out of her, because over the years she's just learned a lot by paying attention. But that's the critical aspect, is that pay attention. If you want to be a good witness of the Lord, if you want to bear witness to the power of God, pay attention. I don't mean just to study, I mean just in general. Pay attention to what's going on around you. Pay attention to the Word. Pay attention to what you're being taught, yes. If we pay close attention, then that will lead to us having a more accurate record, Like these guys weren't paying attention. Because they didn't really care. When we don't, even when we're listening to our enemies, pay attention to what they're saying. Because if you're going to argue against what their falsehood, you've got to know what it is. Otherwise, like Jesus' disciples, like these guys say a false witness. He said this, and they're all like, that's not what he said. That's not what he said. Jesus didn't say that, right? Well, if you go against the enemies of God and say, well, they say this, and then it's like, no, we don't say that. And then other people are going to say, no, they didn't say that. Why are you saying what they said when they didn't say that? Why are you saying they said that? That's not what they said. And what it does is it undermines you as a witness. And it doesn't matter if you get someone else to agree with you. It's just simply not credible. Because, especially, in this day and age, it's not all hearsay. If you're on the internet, it's all recorded and stuff. But in real life, it's not, okay? Well, when you're talking to someone, pay attention to what they have to say. Because a lot of Christians, like, literally practice apologetics by memorizing responses and stuff, or by studying things, and maybe not delivering them verbatim, like back like a memorized line. Like, okay, you say, they'll literally learn like tricks. Like, tell this, ask someone like, well, how do you know, do you believe in God? And if they say, okay, then you follow that question up with another question, and then another question. And these are leading questions. They're trying to get someone to accept God in their heart. You give them questions that they answer yes or no to. But it's kind of, you constrain the path in such a way that it inevitably leads them down to the point where it's like, well, okay, well, why don't you accept Jesus then? My nose is itching. All right, well, I think that's all right. And it's not an effective tool. Well, it may get some people, but it's like, you're not going to, you know, when I think of people I know who came to the Lord, they have these passionate stories about that, you know, that the Lord intervened in their life. And it's like, I've never heard anyone who was passionate about the Lord saying, you know, someone came up to me and they asked me a series of questions, and then I just realized it was just so logical. I should just believe in Jesus. I always think that a more, let's say, organic or personal form of witnessing is just to listen to people. What do they have to say? And also to live a witness that makes people want to know. Like if they're struggling, if their lives are not going the way they want them to go, it's good to have your life in order so that then they can look at you and say, well, how's your life in order? How do you do it? And there's your opportunity to witness. So, their witness is false. And the high priest arose and said unto him, answerest thou nothing? What is it which these witnesses against thee? Their witness is being used as a verb. They're witnessing against you. What do you say? But Jesus held his peace. And the high priest answered and said unto him, I adjure thee by the living God, that thou tell us whether thou be the Christ, the Son of God. And it's funny, there's nothing to answer to that false witness. One, he didn't say it. But two, it's not untrue. So what's he going to say? I think they know they've got this witness against him. They want to just get him arguing. They want to get him in denial. I didn't say that. I didn't say I'd do that. I mean, I could do it, but I didn't say I could do it. What I said was this: get him correcting himself, defending himself, get him on the defensive. It wasn't exactly a great witness against him, because there's nothing illegal about, as far as I know, about saying, well, I could do that, you know. What they're getting at is like, it's a witness that sort of says, you made a claim that can only be true if you are the Christ. And that's what they're really putting him on trial for. Are you the Christ? Tell us whether thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. Jesus saith unto him, thou hast said. You said it. Just like he said to Judas. This is the way he answers many of his enemies in the gospel. Like when they accuse things, he says, you said it. It is a very neutral way of affirming something. Because it's like, well, I said that you're the Christ. No, I'm asking you if you're the Christ. Well, you said it. Nevertheless, I say unto you, even though you've already said it, hereafter shall ye see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of power, coming in the clouds of heaven. He doesn't even say me, though. It's funny. He says, you shall see the Son of Man. It's interesting that he refers to himself as the Son of Man all the time, when they want to know if he's the Son of God. It's an interesting sort of juxtaposition, because God looks on himself as, you know, is he the Son of God? He looks on himself as God. He's really the Son of Man. You know, Jesus calls himself the Son of Man all the time. It's an ironic thing to call himself, because he is God the Son. But he calls himself the Son of Man because he became a man. And I mean, like I said, it's just an interesting sort of twisting there. That's a term that Jesus came up with. it reflects his unique perspective on his incarnation. You shall see him sitting on the right hand of power, coming in the clouds of heaven. Then the high priest rent his clothes, saying, He hath spoken blasphemy. What further need have we of witnesses? Behold, now ye have heard his blasphemy. Went away. This is not bad. The other day was really bad. Well, think ye. They answered and said, He is guilty of death. So, I mean, he ripped his clothes. That was a sign in the old times of, like, great. I mean, to this day, you know, tearing your clothes and ripping them is a sign of great extremity of emotion. Let's say it that way, because it could be anger, it could be sadness. They did it for all. Piece of dust. I thought it was a fly. For all kinds of emotions, you might tear your clothes. You might just go. I mean, we don't, but sometimes people do. You know, under the influence of the Bible, certainly. You know, you read it and you know that, oh, that's an option. If I want, if I want to show off severe emotion, I can tear my clothes. Just rip them off. Rah. It is like, you know, it's a very symbolic thing too. It's sort of like saying something, isn't it? It's saying, you know, these are the things that are made my coverings, and I'm sort of taking them. This is so enraging or so frustrating. I will take my very garments and part them, rip them open, to sort of bear my it's sort of like a bear. As you're sort of bearing your anger, you bear yourself a little more. You open up your clothes, you open up yourself. It's like a letting the wrath out. Is it particularly blasphemous? I suppose so, because it implies, you know, it's like Jesus saying, you want something to accuse me of? Here you go. He said that we would see the Son of Man, which by that he meant himself, and he did, you know. They're so hostile, he could have said something much lesser. They were already going with the false witnesses. And then the elders say he's guilty of death. You're not allowed to say that. You're not allowed to say you're going to see the Son of Man coming in the cloud, sitting at the right hand of power. He didn't even say God, you know, and coming with the clouds of heaven. You're going to see him sitting on the right hand of power. He was so vague. Well, that was enough. They were so hot to kill him that, you know, it didn't matter what he said, what his actual words were. They could plug in whatever they wanted to that. Power is God. Coming in the clouds of heaven. I mean, I don't know. I guess that's something only Messiah is allowed to do that, and you can't be the Messiah because you're not our friend. The Messiah would be our buddy. That's what we know for sure. He wouldn't be critical of us. Then did they spit in his face and buffeted him, and others smote him with the palms of their hands. For some reason, I assumed buffeted meant like slapping with the palm of their hand. I guess it means more like pummel. I guess I was curious suddenly, like what buffeted meant. And I'm gonna find out. I'm just going to use Bible Hub. Here, I'll let you see it with me. Why not? And work. Okay. Alright. This way it's not so boring when I just talk about it. Not that this is... I'm not going to tell you this is going to be an interesting trip down definition lane. And we were on verse 50-something, right? Much later than that. Yeah, we were in the 60s. Okay. Spit in his face, buffeted him. To strike with the fist. So they punched him and slapped him. They spit in his face, they punched him, and they slapped him. Alright, let's get to the out of crazy world. So that's what buffeted means, to punch with the fist. So, they spit in his face, punched him, and slapped him around. Saying, prophesy unto us, thou Christ. Who is he that smote thee? There's all these different people hitting him. Now Peter sat without the palace, the whatever you want to call it, official building, whatever, the council chamber. And the damsel came unto him, saying, thou also was with Jesus of Galilee. But he denied before them all, the servants there, saying, I know not what thou sayest. He's sitting outside there watching this all happen. Sees him being humiliated in front of the people, the elders. It's humiliating. Christ just standing there getting spit on and slapped and punched. It's humiliating. And Peter witnesses it and says, I don't know what you're talking about. You were with him? I don't know what you're talking about. What do you mean? And when he was gone out into the porch, he kind of made his way out. Started, I've got to go. Another maid saw him and said unto them that were there, not to him, but to people standing around, this fellow was also with Jesus of Nazareth. And as Christ is being humiliated at the chief priest, Peter's being humiliated by these women. Because that's what women do. They humiliate men. Because it's sort of like they challenge your bravery. Because they know it's where men are vulnerable. Men are expected to be brave and strong and face danger. It's what people expect of you, women especially. And if you're afraid and you're kind of, they will use that against you. Because there's no a man looking at another. Let me explain why I blame women for this. I'm not blaming, but per se, it's more of a woman thing. There's a lot of times, like in movies and stuff, there's like a thing where they show a bully kind of like, "What are you afraid?" A bully picking on another boy or something like that. That only happens in youth. Men who go through any sort of experience understand. It's not so easy to be brave and bold in every situation, and to live up to the ideal that people set up for men. Women have ideals they have to live up, and we never hear the end of it. But the things men are expected to do are sometimes the most difficult of all. Certainly, I mean, all the most dangerous jobs are filled with almost all men, and all the most, men are expected to do certain things. There's an expectation of bravery, of fearlessness, and all this. And men who have experienced things will kind of understand, like, they also may not be so anxious to go through something like that, and so they'd be less likely to say anything. But this fellow was also with Jesus of Nazareth. Thanks, lady. And again, he denied with an oath, I do not know the man. And after a while came unto him they that stood by, and said to Peter, surely thou also art one of them, for thy speech bewrayeth thee. What is bewrayeth? Old English. Betrayeth. I don't know, I'm just curious now. I'm not going to bring it up again. But, like, it's not going to help at all. Bewrayeth. Maybe betray is the wrong word. I don't know what bewrayeth means. It sounds like betray. But it means evident or clear. I mean, your speech makes it clear. You are from Galilee. So after the second one, he denies. And I'm sorry for picking on women. Obviously, there's men here too, and among the servants, and they, so on and so forth. But it's something that's true in life. Not particularly, no one should ever read anything into that about my personal life. But because I'm married to someone who's uniquely compassionate and all that. But out in the world, I've seen things like this. It's like, it's certainly true that there's an expectation of bravery and face the danger and jump into the fire, and women and children first. And that's what's respectable, and that's what's expected of men, of males. And they're picking on Peter. And the Lord already warned him, you're going to deny me 3 times. Because he didn't know, until you get there, you don't know how you're going to react at all to something like that. You've seen all the earthly authorities that your master's going up against all the earthly authorities, and then they grab him, they corner him, and they start spitting and punching and slapping him around. He is worthy of death. Now, Jesus already said, I'm going to be betrayed into the hands of sinners, and they will take me and kill me and crucify me. And Peter's like, that's not going to happen. And Jesus rebuked him. They all should have knew this was coming. And Peter is not expected to go through it with the Lord. It's not expected of him to die with him. This is something Jesus has to experience on his own. But what Peter needs to experience is the humiliation of the powerlessness and of his own, like, he's not paying attention. They're not listening to their Lord. They have, like I said before, they have their will. And people read the Bible like that too. I mean, quite frankly, and I have no doubt that I am equally susceptible to it. I try to set it aside. Like sometimes I've had people say, like when I talk about death, right? They'll say, when I'm explaining passages that are, let's say, that can be used to contradict my position with a very, let's say, unsophisticated reading, they could easily be thought of as supporting the idea that that after the death is life, all right, whatever. That the after death is just life. Like, in, whatever. I'm just using this for a general point. The actual subject doesn't matter. And when I explain the passage, I say, well, take this into account, that into account, and then read this that way. And then they'll say, like, well, you're just reading it that way because you're trying to make it conform to your position. You're not listening to what it's saying right there. You're changing the meaning or interpreting it in such a way as so to be favorable to what you already believe. I'm aware of that, but the thing is, I didn't start out believing that. I started off believing what everyone else believes because of passages like that. But I continued to pay attention and study, and I found there was a lot more in the Word that actually contradicted that position than there was that contradicted the other. I actually found it was easier to explain away certain passages rather than other ones. Okay. And that's all very, I'm not being specific and maybe it's not obvious. But that's what happens to people. It's not an automatic thing that just because you're explaining something away, it means you are not being an honest broker of the truth. You know what I mean? For someone to deny that things need to be explained is really the problem. I mean, to deny that there needs to be any explanation for things. But when you go about explaining it, you got to be careful. Now, let's just take a moment to finish this chapter. This is the last verse. He began to curse and to swear, saying, I know not the man. And immediately the cock crew. He began to curse, take oaths. I swear by the temple or whatever, there's two things. He cursed and swore. To swear is to take an oath. You say, like, and a curse is to lay a curse on yourself. Like, if I know him, then let my mother die. Or if I know him, cross my heart and hope to die, I don't know him. That's kind of a curse. It's not swearing, that's laying a curse. You say, like, may my arms shrivel away and my eyes rot away in their sockets if I know him. If I know him, let all the hairs of my head fall out. If I know him, may I die, whatever. That is cursing. We get confused. We call cursing profanity. You gotta get everything sorted in the right category. There's swearing, which is taking oaths, like a pirate might say, I'll have his head by thunder. That's an oath. Or by God. And they say by thunder because they didn't want to say by God because it was oath taking. It was considered. That's why you read Treasure Island. It's funny, you don't realize it's censored. Like when he wrote it, he self-censored the horrible language of the pirates taking oaths. And there's cursing and swearing. Well, swearing is cursing. Swearing is taking oaths. Cursing is laying curses on yourself or on other people. Damn him. That's a curse. And profanity is just foul language. Like bathroom talk. That's profanity. There's three kinds of talking we consider. I don't want to say taboo because a lot of it isn't taboo anymore. It's just socially unacceptable now. But everything's context sensitive. Bringing in cursing and swearing as you're denying the Lord is, you gotta. My Peter has all my compassion. He's in a difficult situation. Immediately the cock crows, as the Lord had predicted, and Peter remembered the word of Jesus, which said unto him, Before the cock crow, thou shalt deny me thrice. And he went out and wept bitterly. There's a lot of emotions going through him right there, because it's like, on one hand, he followed because he wanted to see what was going to happen. There was some faith there. but Jesus is being kind of torn apart as far as like, I mean that figuratively. Spit on, his image of Christ as this unassailable, towering figure. Now he's being brought down, and his humanity is being fully laid bare. He's seen as powerless in front of the powers of the world that have the power to destroy you. And he really believes in him, and then he comes in and he starts denying him. And he remembered the words, and it's just all that just swirling around his head just broke him down. It would break anyone of conscience down. And so ends chapter 26. It doesn't get brighter for a little while anyways. So, anyways, that's the end of the study. We've come a little over time. Thanks for joining me. I look forward to studying with you again tomorrow. Hopefully I'll be feeling a little better.
If God were your father, you would love me, for I proceeded forth and came from God. Neither came I of myself, but he sent me. Why do you not understand my speech? Even because ye cannot hear my word. Ye are of your father the devil, and the lust of your father you will do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and abode not in the truth,